Okay, to illustrate the look, layout, line, shape, shadow, shine and the finish system, we're going to be drawing an exercise using this hot glue gun. And what we end up producing is something that looks a little bit like that. So what's the first step? Well, the first step is actually, before you even start drawing anything, is to learn how to look at them. The look. Now, learning to look at objects is very important for designers and artists because you need to be able to see the detail. Let me illustrate with this. How are we going to draw this? Well, what we're going to do is establish a basic structure for the object. I'm going to use a piece of glass here to help illustrate what I'm talking about. I need to establish the overall proportions of the object. And as you can see, it's pretty much part of a square. What I need to do now is to look at those proportions in a little bit more detail. So I have my outline square, and I can break that square down into quarters, and I can break each square down into further quarters. This helps me because I can now figure out where things are within the drawing. So there's the point there, there's this line going across here, there's this sort of edge down here with the kick out at the bottom, a little V shape there, a little box on the end, and I can also start to work out where details are within the drawing. The trigger sort of sits from that middle point going out that way. There's a nice curve. This helps focus your looking. Now, you don't always have to do it on a piece of glass like this. You have to visualize it in your head as you're looking at the object. What we're then going to do is transfer that onto our piece of paper, which will be the next stage. And that is our look. Okay, once we've completed the look, the next key thing is to do the layout. The layout is where we use a very light pencil. I'm going to use pen just so that you can see what I'm doing. And it doesn't matter as long as your pen's quite faint. Now, the layout is basically doing the look but onto a physical piece of paper. So there's my overall square. Then I analyse the proportions, breaking that down into the quarters and the half markers that I did before, and then looking at my look and remembering and focusing on where the details were within the drawing to allow me to produce a very rough sketch of the layout. So this is not really a complete drawing at all. It is just a case of putting in a couple of lines to try and define the basic shape of the object. Try and establish the proportions and get things in the right place, which are the right size. And remember, there's a series of lines down here, and remember the trigger was around the middle, taking up the bottom half here and sort of going back towards the middle. And I can refine this a little bit later, but that's my basic layout. And there we have it, a layout. Okay, here we have the final stage of the sketching phase, which is the line. This is where we're going to refine this drawing and actually try and turn it into something that looks like the object that we're trying to draw. This is about looking more carefully at the object and adding in the detail and the accuracy for the real drawing. Try and keep nice continuous straight lines. Don't worry too much because there will be opportunities in the rendering phase to tidy up these loose edges and make some of these lines disappear. Again, this is not about sticking rigidly to your original layout. This is simply using that as a guide to allow you to recreate the object. Oops, I'll have to tidy that up a little bit later. And there was a cable running through the bottom of here, so I might just remember that. So if you remember something, don't be afraid to just add that into your drawing. Make some changes here, that was a little bit long. Now I haven't counted these, but I'm just trying to create the general effect that there are some vents along the side there. Orange bit where the glue came in. And I think just to add a bit of an effect, I'll put a glue stick on there as well. Okay, right, let's sort out the curve of the trigger. And the trigger is something that we activate, so I'm going to sketch a little curve here and just put in a little arrow. Arrows are great for showing direction and motion, and they really sometimes bring a drawing to life. And we'll be talking and showing a little bit of an arrow session on its own. And there we have our basic line drawing. Okay, now for the shape phase. This is where we're going to actually start colouring and rendering in the drawing. The shape step actually really is the step where we start colouring in. So we define the shape with what we call a base colour, or a series of base colours. We've got the areas that were orange, and define those. The grey of the glue stick. A little bit of red for the arrow. Arrows are nice in a strong red colour, are very good because people notice that, especially on a sort of a more softer coloured drawing. For the actual body of the drawing, I'm going to use a slightly older pen. This is going to be a bit scratchy and make a little bit of noise, but it's going to leave some lines which are going to add to the texture of the drawing. So you don't have to have a brand new pen. You know, keep your old pens. They're good for creating more textured effects. You can see it's a little bit faded. I'm just going to put myself a safety edge around there that I can run into when I'm colouring. Okay. So it doesn't matter if you've got a little bit of extra lines or streakiness. That can add to the quality of the drawing. It can create texture. You notice I'm going over the edges in some places. You don't have to be super careful here because we're going to be using a black pen to go around the outline and get rid of those. So there you go. Even your old pens can be useful. And that's to find the basic shape. Okay, once we've got the shape, next step is put in the shadows. Now, rather than shading in black edges, what we're going to use is the same coloured pen, and we're going to bake a second layer. And as you add more layers of colour, that area will become darker. Like so. Okay. Wherever you've got a surface or an edge that turns away from you, there's going to be a shadow. So all the way around the object, there's going to be a little bit of a shadowed edge. But also, when we're thinking about an object, this is a flat 2D drawing, but we want to create a 3D effect. So we have to start thinking about where the light's shining on it and where the shadows will fall. And one of the basic rules that we use is that light comes from the left. So there's the light coming from the left, shining on our object, like so, which means these edges and these sides will be catching the light and reflecting it, creating highlights, and these areas on this side will all be in shadow. So let's try and create those shadows now. So I'm thinking, where's the light coming from? Well, this area here is going to be away from the light, so this is going to be more shaded, more shadow around there. Okay. Now the same rule applies for the other colours that you've used on your drawing. So for example, under the trigger here, there's going to be shadow. On the nozzle at the front, these curved surfaces. I'll also need to do the glue stick as well in a second. I'll just finish with the orange. And then let's do the glue stick. So, for the shadow, the light coming from the left-hand side onto the object, creating shadows on the right-hand side. And then we have our shadows. Okay, so we've got our shadows in, the light's coming from the left, we now need to work on our highlights, or our shine. We're going to use two different tools for this. We're going to use our white pencil and our white paint marker or a white gel pen. So looking at where the light's coming from, it's going to be hitting the surface and reflecting towards us. So there's going to be highlights along this edge here that are going to be quite strong because most of the light's falling there. Okay, it's the same on the orange as well. So wherever you think there's light falling that's going to reflect back towards you, you need to add a highlight. That's along the edge of that trigger there. And this starts to really create that 3D effect that we're looking for, even though it's a 2D drawing. And what seems odd is I'm actually going to put a bit of a highlight on this shaded side, because I'm looking at this as a flat surface, then it curves away, and along here there'll be just a bit of an edge. So I'm just going to emphasise that with a little tiny bit of a sweep of highlight. These recesses here are going to be quite shaded on this side, and then on this side they're going to pick up a highlight on their edge. So I'm going to put that in now. There we go. And just to emphasise their shadow, I'm just going to put in my black pencil just to sort of re-emphasise that edge as being in shade. Okay. To finish off the shine phase, then I'm going to pick out the sort of very sharp highlights, the points where all the light's reflected towards us, to try and create a very sharp light point. I'm just going to add one to my arrow to make that look a little bit 3D. Along the edge of the trigger there. Very subtle one in there. On those curves. On top of the nozzle. That's curved in there. Basically, wherever there's a curved surface where there's going to be quite a sharp highlight, emphasise that with the gel pen. And there we've got our shine. So, look, layout, line, shape, shadow, shine. And we're going to finish with how to present this. And there are a range of techniques that you can use to create a finish or present a final drawing. And this is just one of them. And some of the other modules will look at other ways of doing that. Black permanent marker. And we're just going to very confidently give ourselves a couple of straight lines to work in between. I'm going to carefully outline, and this is where you tidy up and get rid of those little overlaps and lines that you created during the sketching phase. This is quite a common technique for designers to use for presentation. You can see this in a lot of books and magazines. The reason that we do this is that an object which is 3D is sitting forward in our visual field, and so the objects behind it, being further away, will reflect less light and therefore be darker. So what we do is just basically give it a dark outline. Now the problem with that is your eye just sees the dark outline at the moment, and we need to break that up so that it's not an outline of the object but an actual background. Switch my pen over to the wide bit and just start colouring quite randomly, because you want to break up that outline so that it's not following the edges of the object that you're drawing. And there we have it. Look, layout, line, shape, shadow, shine, and then one of the presentation techniques for finish. There's the original. You can see some of those highlights reflecting on there now. And there's our rendered sketch.